Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Sitting Duck, a Town of Duck podcast. One of the goals of this podcast is to introduce you to town staff and elected officials, but I also would like to use this podcast to introduce you to people that make up the Town of Duck community. We're a very small town here, and it is not uncommon to see a familiar face from Duck, whether you're around Duck or anywhere in the Outer Banks. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Town of Duck citizen Miriam Rollin, who serves on the Network for Endangered Sea Turtles, more commonly referred to as NEST here in the Outer Banks. It's currently nesting season for sea turtles, and as the name NEST implies, sea turtles are actually endangered, and Miriam's here to tell us all about sea turtles, as well as what NEST does and what you can do to help preserve this species. So welcome, Miriam, and thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kate, for having me.
Sure. So before we jump into this subject, let's take a moment and have you introduce yourself. If you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is, and maybe just a little bit of background information about yourself.
Sure. I am the social media chair for Network for Endangered Sea Turtles. I am relatively new in that role because having a social media committee was a relatively new thing for the Network for Endangered Sea Turtles. So I actually kind of advocated for them to have that. So they were like, great, do it. In terms of my background, I'm retired now. I live in Duck full time. Love it here. Amazing place. We've been coming to Duck for years and years and years, and moved here permanently a little over a year ago, and that's when I started getting involved actively in NEST. But my background is in advocacy. Actually, I did advocacy for disadvantaged kids for my career for 40 years, and I guess I like the underprivileged because, disadvantaged kids and sea turtles, so endangered sea turtles. It's kind of, helping to fight for the underdog.
That was going to be one of my next questions. What kind of led you into the sea turtle realm? So knowing that background, what really drew you to, serving on NEST and being an advocate for an endangered species?
Well, as I said, I've been coming to Duck for many, many years now. Our family vacations have been almost all in Duck. And, and we've seen the nests, and we've been to the Star Center, of course, on Roanoke Island at the aquarium, where they rehabilitate sea turtles that are injured or sick. And, I'm absolutely in love with them. They're an amazing, amazing group of animals. They're all endangered, and some of them critically endangered. It also relates to, some of the challenges we have as a world right now in terms of climate change and things like that affect their habitat and affect their ability to continue to exist. So I just thought, this is something I can do that's both working on an issue I care about, but also really hands-on and really working with these just lovely creatures.
Right. And we'll talk more about this as we get into the interview here, but NEST is a huge advocate for sea turtles, obviously, as the name implies. But there's a large organization dedicated to the preservation of these sea turtles. And if you're on Facebook, you may see us share posts from time to time, and you may even see some volunteers out on the beach and might not necessarily know what they are, who they are, or what they're doing. So we're going to kind of start from the beginning and tell you a little bit about NEST and what they do and what their role is here in the Outer Banks. We're going to give you some information as well, so you'll know how to do your part, essentially, and what that means for your involvement with, responsible tourism and even just being mindful of your environment and where you are. Because again, as we mentioned, we have unifying principles here in Duck, and we care about our environment, and that's one of them. So let's just go for it. What is NEST?
So NEST is the Network for Endangered Sea Turtles, and it was founded originally in 1995. It was incorporated in 96, and it's an all-volunteer, nonprofit organization, and it's dedicated for the protection of endangered sea turtles. From the Virginia line, which is the northernmost boundary of our territory, to the South Nags Head area, which is the southern border. Below us, in the further south, Beaches, Hatteras, Ocracoke, etc., the National Park Service handles turtles in that area. So NEST's functions are to rescue turtles that are sick or injured, to help rehabilitate turtles, to do research that helps us to learn more about these amazing creatures, and then to educate the public, because we know that the more people know about sea turtles, the more they can help each and every one of them protect these wonderful animals. One thing I want to mention is we also partner very closely with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, which actually gives the permit for NEST to do its work. That's a state agency in North Carolina, and they permit all of the sea turtle conservation organizations up and down the North Carolina coast. And then we also partner very closely with the North Carolina Aquarium on Roanoke Island, which is where the STAR Center is, the Sea Turtle Assistance and Rehabilitation Center. That was officially started in 2014.
So for listeners that might be unfamiliar with sea turtles, can you give us a little bit more information about the types of species of sea turtles that nest here in the Outer Banks?
So we have five. We have five sea turtles that exist in the Outer Banks area. Not all of them nest here, at least that we know of. We haven't had any leatherbacks nesting here. That's one of the five that exist in the Outer Banks waters. The other four are loggerheads, which is the most common of the endangered sea turtles here in the Outer Banks. We also have greens. We have Kemp's Ridley. Kemp's Ridley are special in a number of ways. They're the smallest sea turtle variety. They're also the only ones that nest during the day, which is really interesting. They're also the most endangered. So they're not just endangered, they're critically endangered. And then we also have the hawksbill turtle, which is generally hasn't nested here, but we get them stranded sometimes in the Outer Banks area.
Speaking of the Kemp's Ridley, NEST had an exciting sighting recently with the Kemp's Ridley.
Yeah, this was exciting because we don't often get Kemp's Ridleys nesting here in the Outer Banks. We have, but not often. Like last year, we didn't get any Kemp's Ridley at all. We had greens and loggerheads, but no Kemp's Ridley. But this year, just a little while ago, I guess maybe a week ago, we had a Kemp's Ridley up in Kerala that was nesting, and thankfully it was on the four-wheel drive area, and one of the tow trucks that tows all the people who drive on the four-wheel drive area without four-wheel drive. Anyway, they're the towing company, so they found a Kemp's Ridley nesting, immediately called Nest, which was wonderful. Our volunteers quickly got there, and we actually did get some video of the mom, the Kemp's Ridley mom, finishing off her nest, which was really cute, kind of waggling her butt, and then also going back into the ocean. And that's just something you don't often see, since most of our nesters are loggerheads and greens, and they nest at night. Although actually a year ago, some of us in Duck were able to see a mom that was a loggerhead mom nesting on the beach in Duck at night. And you're not allowed to shine lights on them, but we had a night scope, night vision, where we could, a device that allowed us to see her nesting at night, which was really
And I'm excited to hear more about what the volunteers do, because you kind of touched on a little bit with the overnight monitoring. So we'll definitely get to that, because it is fascinating what all of the volunteers do as far as training and becoming, I guess certified. Would you say there's a certification process?
I don't know. The certification makes it sound a little more paperworky than it is, but you do have to be trained,
right.
And you have to get through the training in order to qualify to do the activities.
Right. Going kind of back to the Outer Banks sea turtles, what are some of the biggest threats that the sea turtles face here in the Outer Banks, both, let's say, naturally and human-caused?
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of them are human-caused. Some are natural as well. So obviously, they can just get sick, have bacteria, etc., and that's all natural. The human-related causes do tend to result in the most injury and, unfortunately, death of sea turtles. Things like getting caught in fishing nets, getting hooked by fishermen, ingesting plastic, balloons, all sorts of material that unfortunately is washed into the ocean and ends up killing them that way. They also have been affected by pollution in terms of chemicals in the water. They've been affected by climate change because they, their species each kind of have certain areas, geographic areas where they tend to feed and tend to nest. And as temperatures change overall, particularly getting warmer, it means that the areas that they used to feed in may not have the kind of feed that they're used to eating. And so climate change can really affect that. Also, particularly for young sea turtles, cold stun in the winter can be a killer because they should be, like their adult counterparts who know better, going to warmer water in the winter, either the Gulf Stream or further south. But some of the younger ones don't do that. And so, unfortunately, what happens with cold stun is the water temperature will suddenly go down and they'll literally kind of be, they won't be able to move. They won't be able to swim. They won't be able to eat. And they can die because of that sudden drop in water temperature. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things we do is rescue cold stun turtles. So those are all some of the threats that these species are fighting. I mean, it's sad, but sea turtles, on average, we estimate, and it's just a rough estimate, but we estimate that about 1 in 1,000 eggs will actually grow to become a mature adult sea turtle. So the odds are really against them, and that's why Nest exists and tries to protect them.
It's really interesting to hear, the fisherman side of things, because people might not think about, if you're out fishing, what happens if you accidentally hook a sea turtle, because it's possible and it has happened. And
it happened right in front of me on the beaches in Duck, actually. And, my husband and I were just far enough that we couldn't get to him before he cut the line. So if you are fishing and you catch by accident a sea turtle, don't just cut the line and send it back, even though, your brain may say, oh, he's got to get back to the water quickly. Like, that's the best way I can protect him. Well, actually, no, that's not. He'll probably die with a fish hook in his throat. So instead, call Nest hotline, which is, by the way, 252-441-8622. And I'll repeat it at the end of the session as well. But so call the Nest hotline, which is also online. You can get it from our website. And then volunteers will come and we'll take him to the Nest, to the Star Center at the aquarium in Roanoke Island and get him, get the fish hook safely out, make sure he's eating again, make sure he's, swimming and doing all the turtley things, and then they can send him back.
What's the turnaround time frame? What's the turnaround time frame for rehabilitation?
That's a really good question. And, kind of like with humans who go to the doctor, like, how long will it take them to heal? Well, it depends on a number of things. It depends on their age. It depends on their pre-existing conditions. It depends on what the specific problem is that you're dealing with. So like at the Star Center, where I also volunteer, which is a lot of Nest volunteers also work at the Star Center. Turtles can be sent back within hours or days if it's a fish hook that wasn't too far down the throat and so it didn't really do much damage, or it can be a year or more for a turtle that's really pretty significantly injured.
Do you find that younger turtles are more resilient than older turtles? I know you said it's a case by case, but...
Yeah, it really is case by case because... sometimes actually the mortality rate, what I've read is that the mortality rates for younger turtles are actually higher. Part of that is because they're smaller, and so there are more predators that are bigger than they are. And so that's we didn't talk about in some of the threats, but predation is something that they have to face. They could be a little shark snack if they're a little, baby turtle. They could be a seagull snack, if they're a baby turtle, just hatchling coming out of the nest. So, so it really does depend. But sometimes actually the smaller ones are actually less kind of defensible, whereas the older ones, their shells fully hardened. They're big, so they're a little harder for other animals to get to. And And in many cases, they're in deeper water, so they're less likely to get, some of the predation or some of the human effects that happen right on the coast.
And you mentioned, the hatchlings kind of emerging from the nest. I think that's a good segue into, I think something really interesting is what the nesting process is like. You touched on the Kemp's Ridley and how they nest during the day, which is uncommon of sea turtles. So aside from that, what is the typical nesting process like for a sea turtle?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Most of them nest at night, except for the Kemps, as I mentioned. So the mom will come ashore. You can see her little tracks in the sand coming ashore. She'll come towards the dune, not always to the dune, but at least a little ways up the beach. And then if she finds a spot that she likes, she'll settle in, dig a hole, which is actually amazing that these flippers, you think of a turtle flippers as just being good for swimming, but they actually can manipulate their flippers kind of like we use our hands to dig. Like it's impressive.
Like scoop?
They scoop, and which, like, you wouldn't think a flipper could really do that artfully, but these moms dig these little egg chambers that are like deep and round and nicely shaped, and then they lay their eggs. So they'll lay, a mama will lay somewhere between, 80, 90, up to 120 or more eggs. On average, last year we had 105 eggs. That was the average egg clutch in a nest. And then when they're done, they'll use their flippers again to cover it all up, and then cover it with sand, and then head back into the ocean. Many turtle moms will actually lay when they're in their laying year, which isn't every year. Often they'll take a year or two off. But when they're in their nesting year, they'll often lay 2, maybe 3, maybe more nests within that summer time, that spring and summer time. And so, it's interesting because you could have a mom laying a nest in Nag's Head and then 2 weeks later laying a nest in Duck, and then 2 weeks later laying a nest in Corolla, or even, up, north or further south or whatever.
And there are identifying features for the types of ways that you see where the nests are. So you were talking about how they use their flippers to dig. And I had asked you this before, if you're able to tell what kind of turtle it was without even seeing it. And you can tell by the pattern, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating because different turtle moms have different patterns in the sand that they leave from their march up towards the dune and then back to the ocean. And so, for instance, most of our nests are greens or loggerheads. And so if it's alternating, kind of like they're doing the crawl and swimming, so that would be a loggerhead. And if it's more like the butterfly, if they're kind of synchronous in terms of being next to each other, then that would be a green. And also usually the greens have kind of a tail line as well from dragging their tail. So anyway, yeah, you can tell from the markings whether it's loggerhead or green, and then the Kemp's Ridley obviously is its own thing because it's happening during the day often.
So when you come across a nest, or if someone contacts Nest to report one, what is Nest process for protecting that?
So what happens is, whether it's, however it happens, well, usually it's from our ATV drivers in the morning that are finding the nest, but sometimes it's just a beach walker in the morning. As I said, it was the tow driver up in Corolla. And then we've also, in Nag's Head, we had a trash collector early in the morning that was collecting trash on the beach. And they apparently have bins on their beach. And he spotted a turtle actually finishing, it was a loggerhead, finishing her nesting early in the morning. And so, so they can be found different ways. But what happens is, so they'll call the hotline. The hotline then has a system where they'll send out a voicemail or a call to all of the volunteers that are working for that area, wherever the nest was. And then the volunteer, and they'll also have an appointed lead responder for that day in that area. And so the lead responder will respond, and then other nest volunteers will come as well to help, and we'll go to the nest. We'll try and find where the eggs are, which you'd think would be easy. And sometimes it is, and sometimes you can be digging for a couple hours before you find the egg. So sometimes it's a little harder to find. Sometimes the mom moves around. Maybe she, kind of looks like she's trying one area, but decides not to lay her eggs there. She actually goes a little further and lays them there. So it can be hard. So we dig, we find the eggs. We actually we take out some of the eggs and then put a data logger that logs the temperature amongst the eggs in the nest. So kind of not quite the center, but near the center of the nest, and then put the eggs back except for one. And we take the one, which is sacrificed, sadly, but it's for research. So we can find out which mom laid that nest from the DNA in the eggshell from that egg. And then we put another temperature logger at the same depth as the one that's in the nest outside the nest, so that later, about 60 days later, when it's getting ready to hatch, from the differential in the temperature between the one in the nest and outside the nest, we actually can figure out, okay, there's some metabolic activity going on. Those little guys are getting ready to come out. So we know when to then do the response that is the nest sitting.
With the one egg that you keep for research, what do you guys do with that one?
So that one, what happens is we take it. Oh, first of all, we take it away from the nest because we're going to have to crack it open and put the yolk out. We only need the shell for the mom's DNA. The yolk would have the turtle child's DNA, but we just want the mom's DNA. So we pour the yolk out, but we don't want that near the nest because we don't want predators to be attracted. Like, ooh, there's eggs here, So we do that. We walk away from the nest. We break open the egg. We put the yolk down in the sand and bury it. And then we take the shell and put it into a little vial with some alcohol in it, close up the vial, label it as to which nest it's from. And then we take those to the Star Center. And then from the Star Center, they actually go to the gentleman in South Carolina that's the head of the research on particularly with an emphasis on loggerhead mom's DNA, like where they're laying when.
When it's time for them to hatch, you've tracked them, when there's some metabolic activity that's starting. What's next?
So next is what's called nest sitting, which sounds like babysitting, and in a way it is. It's baby turtles rather than a human baby. So when it's getting close to time, we'll look at those temperature differentials in the loggers. We'll also, there's also a listening device technology that's really cool. That's kind of like these headphones that we're wearing, but you can actually put something in the sand and it can hear if there's the little scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scratch of little turtles starting to hatch in the ground. So we listen, we do the temperature, and then when it looks like it's getting close, we'll actually have volunteers do nest sitting in the evening. So they'll go out. They'll clear a runway from the nest to the ocean. They'll flatten out the sand and make sure that it's nice and easy to traverse. They'll put some kind of barriers on the edges of the runway so that, frankly, we keep people and pets and other things out of the runway. And then we wait for the little guys to erupt. Sometimes the nest can erupt all at once, which really is amazing. Sometimes you'll just have like one little guy come out and then another guy, so it varies. But the nest sitters are making sure, again, that people and dogs stay away and that all the little guys go in the right direction and head towards the horizon, which is the ocean.
That's important too when we talk about horizon, and we talked about artificial light beforehand, but why is that important? You mentioned horizon, and that's kind of a key word with sea turtles.
It is. So there are a number of things, and maybe we can talk about this now that people can do to help protect sea turtles, and one of them is to not have either ocean front or actually on the beach lighting at night. Particularly during either the nesting season or the hatching season. So the nesting season in the OBX starts like late May, goes till maybe October, sometimes November. And then the hatching season, goes usually from, late July, early August into, again, September, October. If it starts getting too cold, the nests aren't going to hatch. So But anyway, not having artificial light that's towards land is going to help both the mom turtles see the horizon so that they know where to go back to the ocean. There actually was a case, I forget whether it was Florida or South Carolina, just in the past week, of a turtle that got a mama turtle that was laying eggs and got turned around and ended up crossing over the dune and going into the road and getting killed. So artificial light can distract them. They're looking at the horizon because there's just a little bit of reflection on the horizon that the turtles can sense, and that's what they head for. Both the moms heading back to the ocean and the little guys, the little Ritz crackers with flippers that are getting hatched.
And on that note, let's talk more about what people can do. I know that something you guys recently put out that I never even really thought about, when it is nesting and hatching season, to flatten sandcastles.
Yeah. So both for the moms who are nesting and for the little hatchlings, it's really, really important that, if you want to dig sand, if you want to dig big holes, if you want to make sandcastles, go for it. But just before you leave for the day, make sure you flatten them out. You fill in any holes and you tamp down any sandcastles. And that's because those are obstacles that not only can hinder the progress of either a nesting mom or a hatchling, it can actually kill the mom if the mom falls the wrong way into a hole. So that is very, very dangerous. Obviously, it's also dangerous for people. People have gotten hurt falling into the holes. And actually, our ATV drivers in the morning, so they're going out just before dawn. It's not fully light yet. You can't always see all the holes. And if you're riding on an ATV, trying to find the marks in the sand from the nesting moms, that can be dangerous. So please, if you're on the beach, have fun in the sand, do your holes or do your sandcastles, but please flatten the sand before you leave for the day.
Right. And that, pairs also with, the whole idea of leave no trace. You want to leave nothing but footprints and leave it how you found it. Make sure you take all your trash. As Miriam mentioned earlier, they can mistake trash and balloons as food. And if you're listening to this and you're wondering how you can make a difference, there's how. If you want to help us, preserve our environment and take care of these sea turtles, leave no trace.
Yeah, and all three of the things you can do: clean, flat, dark. Leave the beach clean, flat, and dark at night. Clean, take all your equipment. Don't leave it on the beach overnight. Some people, I know it's actually against the law in Duck to leave stuff on the beach overnight. And, don't do it because that can really be a hindrance. So, yeah, take all your trash. In fact, if you see trash, take someone else's trash. Like that, even if it's not yours, it's still going to end up in the ocean and possibly ingested by, and it's not just sea turtles. I mean, we had a whale a beaked whale that was killed recently, not too far from the Outer Banks. It had a balloon in its stomach. So it's not just the turtles; it's also marine mammals and marine birds, and all sorts of wildlife are affected by trash and plastic, especially plastic bottles, balloons, etc.
Mm-hmm. And you don't even have to be at the beach to make a difference. I mean, a lot of the balloons that you see are from somewhere else. So we recently adopted an ordinance banning balloon releases here in Duck, and leave the balloons at home.
And yay, Duck for being the first jurisdiction in the Outer Banks to ban balloon releases. So Go Duck. That was a great move. And some other jurisdictions are following. We're hoping that Dare County will follow. We're hoping that that the whole state will follow. Virginia has banned balloon releases. We're not banning balloons, but just the releases that take them into the air, because people think, oh, isn't that beautiful? It just goes into the clouds. Like, no, it eventually comes down. And often where it comes down is in our waterways and oceans.
Yeah, and I forgot who. I know I had posted something a while ago, but I'd seen it before where it's a video showing what a jellyfish looks like underwater. And it was a deflated Mylar balloon. So if you want to make a difference, it's not hard. Just leave no trace. Let's kind of go back to talking about the volunteers. They do their nest sitting, and there's a lot that goes into training and organizing the volunteers. So if someone was considering this, what are the different ways that volunteers attribute to the organization and the preservation of sea turtles?
Yeah, so there are kind of different groups, and sometimes people are in all of the groups. Sometimes they're just in one or two. But the groups of volunteers are generally, you have the ATV riders who are going out and finding the tracks in the sand from the moms. You have the nest responders. So nest response is the second, which is, just after the nest is laid, protecting it. We have the nest sitting, which is when you're waiting for the little guys to come out. We also have the stranding responders who can respond to a stranded turtle. And then specifically one type of stranding that we get a lot of, and particularly in January, is the cold stun. So there's a specific training for cold stun response, in part because some of the stranding response that we get is actually dead sea turtles, sadly. But the cold stun is actually, they're all alive. They just can't move, can't eat, can't do anything, and they will die if we don't respond. And so those are turtles that are brought to, actually initially to a kind of triage center in Buxton, and then they're brought to the Star Center up in Roanoke Island at the aquarium.
So what's the training process like? Again, let's just picture someone considering this, what's the commitment as far as the time commitment and on-hand experience?
So in terms of time commitment, it actually is pretty flexible. Now, it generally favors people who live here. Like, I don't think you could easily do it as a person who doesn't live here. But maybe you could do part of it for like a part of the season. You don't have to commit. There's no like minimum number of hours you have to commit. So you respond. So for instance, when the call goes out that there's a nest to respond to, as many volunteers as have time and are available and aren't out of town that day, come. So there's no minimum commitment of hours, but Nest is hoping that when Nest puts the effort in to train you and to make you a part of the team, that you're gonna be responding to some of the nests, or to the nest sitting or stranding or cold stun.
How many volunteers are there?
We have hundreds now.
Hundreds?
It's a large group of volunteers. It's across the whole Outer Banks, and even I think we have some folks from mainland Currituck too. So there are quite a few volunteers. Now, we don't get hundreds at any individual event. We get, it varies. We get anywhere from, maybe 5 or 6 to sometimes we can have 20 or 23, or that's probably the top of what we've had. But yeah, so somewhere along those lines.
What's been, as a volunteer, what's been your most memorable encounter experience?
I think probably the most memorable for me, well, the nesting mom on the beach a year ago in Duck was pretty memorable. At night, watching this through the night vision goggles. That was pretty cool. I think, though, the most memorable was actually just a few weeks ago when we had we were heading, actually, my husband and offspring and I were all heading to visit the aquarium, ironically, for the day, and we were driving by Jeanette's Pier when a call came in that a Kemp's Ridley turtle had been hooked by a fisherman and needed transport to the aquarium. And we're like, heck, we're literally there at Jeanette's Pier and we're heading for the aquarium. So we went in and we got this beautiful, beautiful little turtle. Kemps are smaller than the other species of sea turtles, and they're just beautiful animals. And so we got him in a little bucket and brought him over to the Star Center. He still had the fish hook embedded in his throat, and unfortunately, sometimes if it's just like in their mouth or not too deep down, sometimes the folks at Jeanette's Pier can actually get it out. But this was far enough down the throat that they couldn't do it, and so we took it to the Star Center, and Amber, who's amazing, who runs the Star Center, was there ready to receive the turtle. We brought the Kemps into the treatment room, and Amber was able to utilize these these devices that they have to kind of keep the mouth open, and then some volunteers were gently holding the turtle to make sure it didn't, get hurt while she's doing this. And then there's other equipment that she used to actually kind of, in a sense, hook the hook and gently get it out of his mouth. So watching that whole process of having a hook removed from this beautiful, beautiful turtle's throat, and then being able to volunteer at the Star Center the next Monday. So I saw it and it was doing well. And then the next Monday when I came for my volunteer shift, he had been sent back home. So it was a happy ending for that turtle. So so definitely if you're fishing, don't cut the line and send it back into the water. Call the hotline, 252-441-8622.
Love that little plug there. So it was only there for a few days. Now when you go to do the release, because it's not, a nest that's hatching, is that release any different than, when you have a runway for a nest when those turtles are hatching?
It's different in a number of ways. One thing that the aquarium, since the aquarium runs the Star Center, they coordinate the releases, and they had a public release, and apparently it was near Pea Island, and apparently it nearly shut down Route 12 on Pea Island. So because there were just too many people, and so now we don't do public releases. So there's not a lot of people there. It tends to just be staff and maybe a couple volunteers, and so they're just letting the sea turtle go. We actually had at the Star Center last Monday, we had 4 sea turtles there, one of each kind that we get at the Star Center, because we don't get leatherbacks. They tend to be in the deeper water. But we get the other 4. So we had a green, a loggerhead, a Kemp's, and a hawksbill, all at the Star Center, all being rehabilitated. And then this week, all 4 were gone. They were all sent back home to the water. One of the hawksbill, who likes really warm water, was actually sent out on a research vessel to the Gulf Stream and returned to warm water there.
Oh, wow.
And then the other 3 were returned to the water nearer to where we are. But one of them, Scar, who was a big loggerhead, they were able to put a satellite tracking device on her back. So in a few weeks, we'll be able to track on the aquarium website where Scar is along the coast. And it's amazing. You can currently track 2 other released turtles, Miss Piggy and Behemoth.
I was about to ask about Behemoth.
Yeah, Behemoth and Miss Piggy both got released about a year ago, and you can track them on the website. And last I saw, Behemoth was apparently partying off Bermuda, and because why not? And Miss Piggy was staying a little closer to home. She was off the Virginia Beach area.
What's the furthest that you've seen a sea turtle travel from the Outer Banks?
So they can travel easily hundreds of miles. Some sea turtles travel thousands of miles. Which really kind of goes to something that maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but in terms of misconceptions people have about turtles. So a lot of people think of land turtles when they think of turtles, and so they think of them being slow and not really going very far. And not the case with sea turtles. Like those animals go. So they can, when they're threatened or excited, they can go up to 30 miles an hour. So they can really move through the water, and they can go far, like really far. And in the case of leatherbacks, they can actually go really deep. There was an article recently about a research study. They had put a tracker on a leatherback, and he dove like 4,400 feet, I think it was, which is deeper than a naval submarine can go.
I remember seeing that, and I remember asking you about that too, because this was an aha moment for me. But when you think about a turtle, you typically think about a hard shell.
Right.
And you don't, when you ask how can a leatherback do that without being subjected to, the pressure that it might face, well, because it's a leatherback.
Leatherback, right. It's not literally leather, but it's called leatherback because its back is kind of a more malleable, I mean, not really soft, but it's more leathery as opposed to hard. the leatherbacks are the only sea turtle that doesn't have a hard shell like that, so they can do it.
So are there any other misconceptions about sea turtles?
Those are probably the biggest ones. I think the other one is, I think we mentioned this earlier, but that moms always come back to lay eggs where they were born. And, with the recent DNA research that we've been able to do, not we, but the folks at South Carolina with the egg shells that we've provided through Nest and through other organizations up and down the coast, they have learned that these animals can nest hundreds of miles apart. Even in the same season, their nests, can have multiple nests, and they can be miles and miles apart. So yes, they may in part come back to that one beach, but that'll just be maybe one of a number of nesting places that they go to.
Is there anything exciting or new happening at Nest?
So I think a couple of exciting things. So one is we have substantially upped our social media presence, both on Facebook, which we've had, but we've really kind of upped the game on that. And we've also started an Instagram account as well, so you can follow both of those. But in terms of exciting, I think a key part of the mission that I haven't really talked as much about, but that's really, really important, is educating the public. And so, social media is part of that. Part of that is also just when we're on the beach and we're, putting the twine around the stakes around a nest, or digging to try and find the nest, or opening up the DNA egg. When there are members of the public around, we walk them through what we're doing so that they can learn more. And we hope ultimately do more to protect these vulnerable creatures. And so public education is a key part of what Nest does. And one exciting thing that we're doing is actually the next generation of turtle advocates. So we have programs in the Dare County schools, public schools, and elementary schools. It's a whole curriculum, and it includes a visit to the Star Center, and it includes, certain curricular materials. And it's just really exciting to see how engaged young people are about sea turtles, and to know that when they're getting this at that age, like they're going to care about sea turtles and about doing everything they can when they grow up. So,
right. So they're going to tell their friends.
And they're going to tell their friends, absolutely.
And it keeps going. So if someone sees Nest out on the beach, would you invite them to come speak with you guys?
Absolutely. So we are always, you'll see our green shirts with sea turtle volunteer, I think it says on the back. And it has Nest, the word NEST on the front. So yeah, just come up and say, hey, what's going on? And we'll explain. And, it was actually fun because we had some kids at one of the nests recently, and they were really curious about the eggs because they look like ping pong balls. And so when we told them but they're not hard like ping pong balls, they're kind of soft. You can actually kind of indent them easily. They were fascinated. They're like, oh, can we feel one? And so we put one into a glove, one of the very, very light rubber gloves that we use when we're working with the turtle eggs, and put them in there so they could actually feel the DNA egg before we broke it open. They were like, oh, cool. So they really enjoyed it. So yeah, there are ways that folks can get information just when they just see us out on the beach doing our thing.
That's awesome. I think it's so great what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to see what happens and what comes.
Me too.
It's very fascinating.
Me too. Well, there are some increasing challenges in terms of some of the challenges that I mentioned earlier, but we also have increasing protection efforts. So, so we can only hope we're outrunning the challenges with the protection efforts and ultimately helping these species to actually go from being endangered to not.
Great. And as you've mentioned, you have a more robust social media presence. And I know I've shared some of your posts. So if you are listening, go check out our timeline and make sure you give them a follow. There's a lot of great educational information, and it's getting some good coverage because, again, public education is the key here. And it starts with you. So don't discount Facebook.
Absolutely. Facebook, and also our website. Feel free to visit. It's nestonline.org, nestonline.org is the website. And, you can actually, if you find one of the nests on the beach in any given season, like you're visiting and, oh, here's one of those, squares that has the 4 posts and the twine and says it's a nest, endangered sea turtle nest. Look on the sign. It'll have a number, a nest number. And you can go to the website, nestonline.org, and go to the current nests page of that website and find that number nest, and you can find out when it was laid. And you can even find out when it's, you can count 60 days from then to know when it's likely to start potentially hatching.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that. And I know I'm working with you, too, to also have some wildlife information on the town's website as well, because going back to that public education, any way we can get this out, we're happy to do. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just thank you so much for helping to get the word out. I've never encountered a human who has not been really responsive when we've talked about turtle preservation. It's just that a lot of people don't know, And so we really, really want to get the word out, and Town of Duck has been a great partner in that. So thank you.
Of course. And, I think it's great to have this platform to be able to connect, the different organizations that exist here in the Outer Banks to our listeners, and hopefully people learn some things and they want to learn more and do their part. So with that being said, thank you so much. It's been great.
Great. Thank you so much, Kay. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Sitting Duck, a Town of Duck podcast. Make sure you like this episode, subscribe so you know when new episodes post, and share it on your social media so more people know about it. For the latest that's happening in the Town of Duck, visit townofduck.com.